All right, we're live. Hi, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us today. And Nisa, which is one of our mentors in the mentorship program, is going to talk about freelancing. So Nisa, do you want to share your slides?
Yeah, let me go ahead and do that. Hi, everybody. Looks like you need to give me permission.
Oh, yeah, those Zoom security thing. Okay, should have that.
Okay. All right. Can you see these okay?
Yeah. Right. Yeah, I see that perfectly.
All right, well, let me know when.
Yeah.
Go ahead and get started, or should we wait a little longer?
I mean, we can wait if you want.
3:03. What do you think? Maybe we can start going over housekeeping and then go from there.
Yeah, we can go over housekeeping. There's not much into it, so we can do it quickly. So we want that to be as engaging as possible. So thank you so much for joining today, and feel free to turn your camera on and come off mute. We want to hear you and see you. And we are live streaming this event. Just take that into account. If you're not talking, please mute yourself. And just you can feel free also to write your messages in the chat box. If you want to remain anonymous, that's fine. You can message me directly. Yeah, and follow us and other virtual events we're doing. And I think we can go right to it, Nisa.
Okay, sounds good. Well, thanks so much to you, Limor, for helping me host, and for everybody here that's in the Zoom room and watching the live stream. So I just want to give a quick note on who this talk is for. So it's really for anybody who has maybe dipped a toe into freelancing or is flirting with the idea of freelancing. Maybe you have a job right now and you're thinking about sort of leaving that 9-to-5 and getting more flexibility, but you're not really sure how to get started. There are people who are more seasoned freelancers than me. I started my freelancing company about a year ago. And so what I really want to do is give you a sense of what that first year looks like, and maybe give you some of those tools really just to kind of get started and see how you can scale it. So what we're going to go over today is number one, how to define your goals for freelancing. Why do you want to freelance? This is a really important step if you're really just getting started or thinking about getting started. Two, the positioning. How do you define what you're selling, and how do you talk about it to people in the market so that they understand and have a good sense of what they're going to get when they hire you? Number three, how do you get those first clients? We'll go a little bit over a little bit of networking, marketing, and shameless self-promotion. A lot of us, that can really be a sticker for some people. You know, we're not used to talking about ourselves. So I'll give you some tips on how to do that. And then just a few nuts and bolts for how to set up and run your business. How to do it simply so that it doesn't feel overwhelming and that doesn't become a blocker for you to just go ahead and get started and start getting paid. And we'll try to leave time for questions at the end. If you have questions throughout, please don't hesitate. I do better actually if you kind of, break in and interrupt me and ask questions. I don't mind that. So feel free to do that, either put them into the chat or come off of mute and just ask.
Yeah, absolutely. We definitely want that to be an engaging conversation. So feel free to ask any questions.
Okay, so before we dive in, let me just tell you a little bit about me. My name is Nisa King. My majority of my professional background is in product management. I started around 2009. I had my own business actually before that, but and then before that I was in graduate school, but the bulk of my career has been in technology. I've been a PM. I moved into director of product and I was head of product for a startup. I've also been an account manager, so dealing directly with clients for a design studio. And my most recent position was COO of a startup called Vitro. Last year, I lost that job because of COVID. The company essentially ran out of runway. And that was when I really decided, I didn't want to take another tech job. It was time for me to really devote some time and energy to my real passion, which is writing. And so I started working on a book and writing every day. And as a way to kind of pay the bills and continue to, to stay afloat, I started my company Thinkin' Inc., which is a branding and storytelling services company. And it was all just freelance at first, and has slowly grown from there. And I've found a really good balance so far. So, that is active, and I have my first book of poetry coming out later this year. It's called Rainbow Body. So I'll tell you a little bit more about that story as we go along. If you want to stay in touch with me, you can find me on LinkedIn. I've got a pretty weird name, so it's pretty easy to find me, or you can follow me on Instagram, which is where I'm more active, which is @NisaKing.
You have a unique name, not a weird name.
Thank you. I have a unique name. That's true. Thank you, Limor. So defining your goals, getting into step one. The first thing that you really want to do is sit down with yourself and ask yourself the question, what is really driving you to freelance? Maybe it's money. You think you could make more money, or maybe money isn't really a concern for you, but maybe it's more money if you feel like you could get your own projects. Maybe it's a passion project. Maybe you could really do the type of things that you want to do, or the types of projects you want to do if you freelance them and you're not, letting another company dictate your work. Maybe it's time and flexibility. Freelancing offers a lot of that, where you can really control your own schedule, and you can determine how much work you take on. Maybe it's location independence, where you can work from anywhere, and you want to travel and do whatever. All of these things are really good benefits of freelancing, but you've got to know what you want in order to manifest it. And really try to, when you do this exercise with yourself, take, 15 or 20 minutes. And I like to write things down, but, you can sort of just think it through or talk to yourself or whatever. And really focus on the positive. I think a lot of people move into freelancing. Well, I think the question to ask yourself is, what do you want to accomplish versus what are you leaving behind, or what don't you like about your 9 to 5? I know all about hating 9 to 5s. But what is it about freelancing that is really drawing you? Because getting clear on what is the positive aspect is going to help you work that into your business plan. So, for example, with Thinkin' Inc., the reason I was trying to freelance was because I wanted more time to write. I could have very easily gone into freelancing and worked 50 or 60 hours a week, just like I was doing at my 9 to 5. But because I had that vision in mind of what I wanted, now I start every day writing, and most of the work that I do for my company, I do in the afternoon and the evenings.
So basically, Nisa, you're saying that you wanted to allocate more time to passions that otherwise, if you worked full time, you didn't have time to do that, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Because a lot of companies, I know that a lot of companies offer, especially during COVID, they offer more flexibility. Like, for example, I work fully remote since 2016. So now even more so than 2016, many companies offer remote. Mm-hmm. So it has to be something more than that, right? Because a lot of companies also provide flexibility, some kind of flexibility at least. But I guess the flexibility you are looking into is like controlling more of your time, like how much time do you allocate? So you can control, okay, if you want to work, as you said, 50, 60 hours a week or 20 hours a week.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and it's going to be different for everybody, and everybody's in a different situation now that maybe offers flexibility, a certain level of flexibility or not. And, for me, working in tech, I could certainly work remote, but I was still going to have to be sort of tethered to my laptop, from 8 a.m. to 5 or 6 p.m. So, with my decision to move into freelancing, I was like, I'm definitely carving out, 2 or 3 hours every morning so that I can work on my creative writing. And yeah, and that's been, that's been kind of my guiding vision as I've worked through this. Is there a question? I think I saw a chat.
It's me. I mean, we have a very quiet audience today.
Well, that's okay. I'll just keep going. Okay, so how to position your services. So what I've got here is kind of two competing kind of paths that you can take, like as you position your services in the market. And the ones that I've bolded are the ones that worked for me. It doesn't mean that's the only thing that will work, but just to share my experience, this is what I found that worked. So you can have sort of a concrete skill set versus a soft skill set. So what I mean by that is concrete skill set, let's say you're a web designer or you're an engineer, or, those things that sort of have like a pretty rigid like idea of what they are and what they do. I was pretty soft skilled. Like I was a product manager, which is kind of a mushy role, right? It's a little bit of business management. It's a little bit of communication. It's a little bit of market research. And I found that by highlighting the fact that my skills were soft, instead of kind of trying to put them in a box, I was able to capture more opportunities that way, that I could work with lots of different kinds of companies who were looking for different kinds of problems, or who are facing different kinds of problems, because I had kind of highlighted more of my skill sets around communication and around management. So if you do have a concrete skill set, that's great. And you should definitely highlight that. I would also encourage you to think about the other ways that you can benefit companies in the spaces that you want to service, because it's just going to give you more opportunities, and it'll create more conversations for you to get in the door in sales.
And when you say highlight, where do you mean highlighting those? On
So,
LinkedIn, on your website, where exactly?
Yeah. All of the above. So I'm going to get in a different slide, I'm going to get to sort of like how you market yourself and where you put these skills. But yeah, all of the above, all of the channels that you decide, you're marketing yourself, or in conversations, like as you're networking, think about, not just like I'm a photographer, but what kind of photographer? What are you really passionate about, and what are you really good at? Is it portraiture? Is it live action? Is it candid shots? Is it what? Is it musicians? Like what? The next one is gun for hire versus a business identity. So, a web designer is not a web designer is not a web designer. Some people are really good at sort of thinking through logo design or brand design. Some people are really good at, responsive websites. Some people are really good at, I don't know, all sorts of things. But when you engage with a customer, or when you engage with a project, how do you approach that project? There's a certain way that you think through the problems in your industry, and that's really interesting for clients. So try to identify that. So for me, I'll give you an example. So I started Think in Ink, and I knew I wanted it to be writing based, because writing is my passion. And so I basically mishmashed all of my expertise in writing and all of my expertise in business, and I came up with this idea of storytelling. And when I try to engage, what I tell people is that I'm not just a writer, I'm not just a copywriter, I'm not just a marketer, not that there's anything wrong with those things, but I really bring sort of this wealth of experience in business strategy and in writing, and I can sort of marry sort of this like quantitative and qualitative, sort of emotional and practical side into my work. So just as an example, what is it about you and your experience that makes you unique?
But also a gun for hire is someone that you want to highlight your uniqueness in some way, right? I mean, I would assume.
Yeah, exactly. I think what I'm saying there is that, if try to sort of make yourself bigger than just like, I can sort of go anywhere, or do, just deploy me into any project, try to give your, because I think you're going to command a higher pay rate if you can sort of bring forward, like, how are you really helping the business overall, or what else can you bring to the table.
But what if I just like to design logos? That's my kind of, thing.
That's great. And I think, but everybody's got something that is unique about the way they go do that. And if that's all you want to do is like, just point me at a project and I'll do it. That's great. But you're competing in a market where there's lots of web designers, so why should they choose you over somebody else?
Yeah.
If you let it come down to price, that's not a good conversation to be in, right? You don't want to just sort of be at a race to the bottom for price.
Yeah.
So you want to differentiate yourself,
It could be, I can say, well, give me a one-liner and I'll give you, I don't know, 50 logo. I don't know. I'll do all the creation of, all the thinking for you. I don't know.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah, it's really a matter, that's not something that I can tell you what to do, but like you've got to think through like what are the experiences you've had, and what are the ways that you approach the problems that are given to you by your customers. The next one is entering the market with a perspective versus letting the market shape you. And this is a classic kind of debate in people who are in product development, right? Like how much do you come in with like, this is the shape of my package and this is what it looks like, versus taking feedback from customers and kind of letting the market tell you what you want to offer. And there's a balance. So I just want to tell you a story about how I came to this idea of storytelling, which is that, I knew I was doing something with writing and I was doing something with market, business positioning, but I didn't exactly know what that was. And I was just talking about that, when I was talking with a potential customer, and I was like, I can really tell your story. And she said, oh, storytelling, that's exactly what we need, and then so I adopted that, and that became what I started focusing on. And then I realized that storytelling is actually a thing. I had never heard of it before, but like storytelling is actually a thing in marketing. And so for me, it was that sort of interplay. I was really getting out there, talking to potential customers, talking to potential partners, and letting them kind of repeat back what it was that I was doing, and then using that to really form and craft my offer. And then the final one is to find a niche versus be a generalist. And I hear lots of conflicting advice on this. When you get into a field and you're freelancing, do you want to, find one thing that you're good at, or do you want to be sort of, jack of all trades? Obviously there's limits. I'm never going to get work.
I have some opinion on that.
Go ahead, Lamar. I'd love to hear it.
I think that when you're just starting out, when you're brand new, like you are just starting, it may be good to be more specific, like maybe narrow down, okay, I help companies that want a logo design, I don't know, for the motor, I don't know, for the motor industry, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And be very, very specific on your target audience, and that can help you maybe attracting the clients because you're very niche-y, you're very, very specific. Yeah. And then as you start getting a name for yourself, and word of mouth, people start referring people to you, then you can say, oh yeah, I did that for the whatever the company that, but I can do that also for flowers, I don't know, whatever, like for other industries. Yeah.
What I found was that the best way that I've gotten work, especially at the beginning, is I talked to folks, I listened to what their problem was, and then I thought of ways that I could solve it. And so Think and Ink has done all sorts of things. We've done, rebrands, we've done market research, we've done logo design, we've done pitch decks. And it's because and so for me, that's this idea is that where can you get a foot in the door? In an authentic way. You can't just be like, yeah, I could do that. Like, can you actually do it? But then, so I think like getting into a niche too early can really kind of eliminate you from those conversations. But if you're in those conversations and you're really just listening to what it is that they need, then you can kind of maybe do something that maybe you didn't necessarily expect, but then it can grow, and you can kind of, then I think you can specialize, So like I said, it's a debate, but my experience was that the broader I kind of cast my net, and the more I kind of that big about how I could help this person that was in front of me, the more I could, the more customers I got, and the more I could really start crafting and shaping, the portfolio of what we do.
Cool. I wonder if anyone from the audience has other thoughts. I would love to hear someone talk or, share in the chat. You're all very quiet today.
Hi, this is Narissa Marbury. You were talking about just how you came to market your perspective and how storytelling came to you. And I'm actually an owner of a business and listening in on this talk, but it's also because there's aspects from a freelancer that can be leveraged from a company as well. And your storytelling accident is similar to services that my company provide, where I started getting asked more often for business advice or operations advice, because my company will offer project management, and now we're offering marketing operations. It wasn't something that we were looking to do, but just from speaking with people and finding out what their needs are, and us just having the skill set readily available, we just started using that phrase and running with it.
Yeah, and I think that's what's so. It's a product. My background is in product development, and it's a key kind of mantra that the market. The feedback from your customers and feedback from the market really shapes the product. So staying open to that, I think, is really important. And a lot of times it's out there, it's out there and you just don't know it, because you've got a little limited purview, and, talking to people really helps you expand, how you talk about yourself. Should we go on, Limor?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about how to get those first clients. So number one, set up a networking regiment, and regiment is underlined because discipline is really your friend here. A lot of sort of getting clients, it's kind of like applying for jobs. It's sort of a numbers game. The more people you talk to, the more people are going to go down that sales funnel. So this is just what I started doing, these numbers, 5 to 10 people a week, but you can kind of think about your own and what's realistic for you. But as long as it's a routine that you'll follow, that's really the key. So what I did is I would reach out to at least 5 to 10 people a week. And I still do this sometimes, like when things start slowing down, I come back to this regiment and I kick it back into gear again. So I reach out to 5 to 10 people a week that I already know and tell them what I'm doing, tell them how the business is growing, tell them that if you're just getting started, tell them, hey, I'm thinking about this transition. Is there anybody that I should talk to, or can you think of anybody that might need these kinds of services? And the people that you might be surprised like how much they really want to help you. And even if you don't see action in that moment, that doesn't mean that nothing is happening. Because 3 weeks later or a month later, they might be like, oh, right, so
you just send them a message like in LinkedIn or an email. Hey, I started my business. I'm doing blah blah blah. Can you think of anyone who can
I think it's more effective to talk to people in person. So usually what I will do is I'll send them a really short note on LinkedIn or over email or text them or whatever the relationship is. Mm-hmm. And just say, hey, I'm starting to think about this. Can we chat for 15 minutes so I can kind of tell you what I'm doing and maybe catch up with what you're doing? It doesn't, no pressure, no like, hey, I'm trying to sell you something.
Yeah.
Really just it's exploratory. So think about it like that. It's exploratory. There's no sales pressure or anything like that. Mm-hmm. You're just letting them know what you're doing and asking about them. Okay. Then the next one is to reach out to 5 to 10 people a week that you don't know that could be potential partners or customers and do the same thing. Tell them, I'm starting this up, whatever the business is. And again, exploratory call, it doesn't have to be salesy. It doesn't have to be, do you need this service? Just people that you think might be interested. And some of them will respond and some of them won't, and that's okay, but you just keep going. And just set an aim for how many calls a week you have. Try to do three to five is what I did.
So if you, I'm just start trying to kind of get to the details. Like if I reach out to 20 people a week, then I can get like 3 to 5 calls.
Maybe,
I mean,
maybe.
that sounds like a pretty good statistics to me, if you ask me.
Yeah, I mean, this is what I did, and I aimed for about 3 to 5, and like this is how it worked out for me when I was first getting started to get those first projects. And it depends on your network, but I think like the bottom line would be like set some of these goals, put some numbers around it. If you're wrong, then adjust, and if it didn't work and you need to reach out to more people, then do that, or if you're getting 1 call a week, that's also fine. That might be fine for you for the beginning.
Was there anything that you discovered during the process, like what mistakes you have made or what didn't work and what worked better?
In terms of these kind of networking?
In terms of the reach out to people, like both people that that and people you don't know, and what kind of,
I'm always kind of perfecting that, I would say. The thing that I always tried to keep in mind was brevity, that the more that I could kind of keep it simple, that like, hey, keep it simple and low pressure, and on the calls themselves, really keep it authentic. The better, where it was, I would just, just honestly try to understand what they were doing, and then to give them a little bit of information about myself. I think one of the best things that I did actually in this beginning period was I looked for other people who were storytellers, who called themselves storytellers. And I reached out to them and just asked if they would talk to me for 5 or 10 minutes, that this is my first time doing this, and I've never done this before. And like, I'd love to have some advice. And most of them were like, yeah, sure. And then I got all of this like free business advice from people who had been doing it for 15 or 20 years. And then I became a part of their network, so that they could start introducing me to people that if they had overflow or something. So it's a really great way, not only for kind of customer building, but just partnership building as well.
That's a great idea.
Okay, so the next one is to do your market research. And like, this can be a little scary, maybe some folks don't know what market research is, or they've never done it before. And so I'm trying to make it not scary. And it doesn't have to be super detailed, So market research, if you don't know, is essentially, it's a basic understanding of your customer base. Who are your customers? That's all that market research really is. You can get into a lot more detail than that, but for the sake of just kind of getting started as a freelancer, you just want to have kind of a general sense of what kind of companies or individuals are you targeting, what problems are they facing, and what stage are they at? So for Think and Ink, for example, I tend to target, I found that nonprofits are really, really sort of like high on potential for customers of mine, because their story is so important. So I tend to target nonprofits. And then also companies that are in some stage of transition. So they're in startup mode and they're trying to raise money, or they're in pivot, and they're trying to enter a new market. And so I went to the market with that kind of, I go to the market now with that kind of messaging, and that's who I start talking to when I post on LinkedIn. That's who I talk to when I'm on, some of these calls. And that it just helps, me make sure that I'm talking to the right people. And then it helps people visualize, okay, this is the kind of customer that you're looking for. Do I fit into that category? Or do I know somebody that fits into that category? So it helps you craft your message, and it helps other people know if they want to work with you. Okay, so number 3, unfortunately, you have to market yourself. And so I hate this part. Like, I've always hated this part. Like, I've never been good at it, and I've learned it's very new for me, and it's a learning curve. And I've even gotten to the point where like I kind of like it. So let me just tell you a little bit about kind of what I've done. So everybody knows, obviously, all social media sites. But I had to get told, time and time again, like, you need to post regularly, and I still didn't do it, so I'm going to tell all of you the same thing, that if you don't have some kind of social presence, that's just going to be part of the freelancing life. You're going to need, people are not just going to find you. You're going to have to go to them, and having an active presence online somewhere is really going to be key for them to establish trust with you. And it's just going to make them easier to find you. So the first thing I did was I built a website that was really targeted towards, that was really targeted. It was really about me, and it highlights both Think and Ink and my poetry because they complement each other. So I created that website, and then I started posting on Instagram 3 times a week, and always using the same hashtags, because people do follow hashtags. And so if you do that, like, more people will find you. And then I started doing an article once a week on LinkedIn. Then most recently, I started looking for peer groups on Facebook. So that's all I did. It's working for me. And it's just, I just sort of chalk it up to like, okay, it's half an hour out of my life every week that like I have to go do, and that's it. But again, it's this idea of kind of just establish a routine that you'll follow and just do it. Think about it that way. It's regimentation, and it's just, my routine is every Friday I write all of my marketing posts, and that way they're done. I don't have to think about them through the week, and I just post them at the times that I've scheduled.
Mm-hmm. It just, how do you come up with the topics every week? How do you know what to put?
Yeah. It's another kind of like what we were talking about, the market kind of shaping you. You start to get a feel for it as you get more likes, as you get more engagement. The things that sort of start driving engagement, you can start doubling down on. But honestly, I don't think you'll hear a lot of marketers give you this advice. Like, there are ways that you could really, if you really want to do that, and you really want to like look at the analytics and like dive into those kinds of numbers, and like really, drive it like keywords and things like that, like, more power to you. That's great. I personally would not be able to do that, because it's just not, I don't have the patience for that. Maybe I'll hire a marketer someday, and that person can do that for me. But so what I do is I just pick topics I like to write about. I just try to make it authentic to me, and that seems to work. I think it's kind of the mentality behind Think and Ink, behind my storytelling business, is that if you're writing authentically and you're writing from a place that's emotionally impactful, people are going to respond to that.
Absolutely. And I noticed, by the way, not just talking about business, but on LinkedIn, for example, I noticed that when I post things that are a little bit personal, not too personal, but something with a personal touch.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I did this, still sharing something, sharing a picture of me or something about me, it's getting by far more comments, more, reaction than just something like more, I don't know, generic.
Yeah, for sure. I've definitely found that too, and people want to see people. There's a moment, I think, with social media that you have to admit to yourself that people might find you interesting, and that what you're doing might be interesting, and to just accept that, and to put yourself out there. So yeah, and I think my last point on this slide is like, even a little goes a long way. Just start small. Start with what you feel like you can do, and if you do it regularly, it'll grow. You'll see that it will grow, and then you'll get new ideas, and you can do that. But stay committed to it.
How much time do you invest in in marketing?
I will do, so usually my Friday mornings are devoted to writing my social media posts. You know, so it might take me 2 hours or something like that a week, you know, and then I post throughout the week. So
that sounds reasonable.
Yeah, 3-4 hours a week total, you know, to kind of like post and engage and things like that.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
It's not crazy.
We do have one question. So Narissa is asking, how do you measure the size of a company / client?
Oh, great. Yeah, so on the last slide. So when I said size, so I say size, stage, and type. So I think about size as like, you know, under number of employees, you know, so, you know, small is sort of like maybe under 100. And then there's sort of mid-size, sort of like up into the maybe around 1,000 or 2,000. And then, you know, larger than that is large, you know, is how I think about it. And then sort of stage of the company, are they a startup? Are they a startup, but they've been around for, you know, 10 or so years, or are they a larger sort of enterprise company, you know, with lots of employees and lots of locations, you know, and which one of those are you capable of working with, and which one of those do you think would be most interested in your services? I hope that helps. Okay, and the last bit of advice I have for getting your first clients is to volunteer. My very first project with Think and Ink came from volunteering with a nonprofit whose mission I really cared about, and I just wanted to help them. And then they realized, as we were talking, they realized I could do some real work for them, and it turned into a paid engagement. And so it can feel a little bit counterintuitive at first, but it's really, especially if you're doing your work from a place of passion, you know, really don't be afraid to sort of look at some of these, organizations that you want to work with and just offer services for free, you know, within reason, where, you know, you're doing something to volunteer with them, and then you can start having those conversations, and they'll know that you're starting to freelance, and, you know, you can let that rise organically.
But how do you balance kind of, you know, you don't want to give them, you know, everything for free, right? You want to kind of give them a taste.
Yeah,
and set it clear that you're doing that happily, but you are also, you know, offering paid services. So how do you strike the balance between the two?
Yeah, it's hard to give a rule for that specifically, you know. It's really just, you know, it's got to come from within you, and what you feel like is reasonable to offer for free. So, you know, in this engagement that I was in, you know, I was helping them just kind of like look through a bunch of their documents and like giving them sort of verbal thoughts on like what they could go do. And then, you know, and then at some point she was like, let's just have you do it, you know, we'll pay you. That was really it. So it was like, I was able to demonstrate my expertise, and, you know, she was a decent, you know, human who was like, I'm not going to ask you to do, you know, like what we would pay somebody to do without paying you. So, you know, you kind of have to navigate those.
Yeah.
But you'll know, you know, I mean, you'll know if you're kind of getting a little bit too far in the weeds without getting paid for it. And if that does happen, then just have that conversation, you know, and just be like, look, I can't go forward unless I'm paid for this.
Makes sense. Anyone have any questions? I mean,
no questions yet?
No, I don't see anything.
Okay. All right, so getting on to the nuts and bolts. So, okay, you've gotten an idea of what you're offering, you know, you've looked into the market, you started talking to people. Now let's say you got a project. So how do you kind of really get started? So the first piece of advice I'll say is always sign a statement of work. And this is something that I've seen freelancers misstep in, that they think, oh, okay, here's the payment, or there's a verbal agreement, or they know the person, and so they don't think it's necessary. And so always sign a statement of work. So a statement of work is a written outline of what you're going to deliver, how long you think it's going to take, and then what the price is. And you don't necessarily, it doesn't need to be a really long contract. You don't necessarily need a bunch of legal boilerplate in there, especially if you're just starting and you're one person. But a standard SOW protects you and it protects your client. So what I do is I have a standard one. I actually have it on the next page. That I just write, and it's like my ideal, with all of the deliverables in there that like I think I could deliver for any given client, and then I adjust it every time, so I've always got this standard one, so I don't have to rewrite it every time. But what it includes is, some introduction from you about what you're doing and how excited you are, an outline of the deliverables, an estimated timeline, at which you can be as clear as you want to be. That's an estimate. It might go longer, it might take less time, the price that you want, and then how you prefer to be paid. And that's really it. So I've gotten questions before like, do I need a contract? And I would say no, I didn't have one. When I first got started, I really still don't have a really lengthy contract. Especially if I'm working with smaller companies, it doesn't, for me personally, in the field that I'm in, I don't necessarily think I need it right away. But I think over time, as I grow, I will get one. But I think just to get started, like an SOW should be sufficient.
So this is something you write yourself. You didn't take an attorney or something, right? I mean, you just wrote it up. And about the pricing, I mean, are you going to talk about pricing?
I am. Yeah, I am.
Okay, cool.
Yep. So that's okay. So that's coming up in a slide or two. Okay, so next one is how to set up your business. So I would say if you're a first-time freelancer, you're just getting started, you have a couple of projects, keep it simple. There's two ways, there's really three ways you could go. One is to just do nothing and just be yourself and like take the money, The second way is to register yourself as a business, as a sole proprietorship, which basically means the business is essentially you, and that any losses that you encounter, you're personally responsible for. Then the third way is an LLC, which sets you up as a corporation, which is a little bit more complicated in terms of paperwork. It's usually a little bit more expensive, but there's separation between you and your business. So if your business gets sued for some reason, you're not personally liable for that, your business is. So I have set myself up as a sole proprietorship. I might go LLC at some point. Again, like as I grow, as I start working with larger companies, as projects get more complicated. To get started, I would say set yourself up as a sole proprietor. And the way you do that is you go down to like the county clerk in your state, you fill out a piece of paper. It's like I set mine up in Texas. It was like $20. I think it's different.
Yeah, I just want to clarify here that we're not giving any legal advice. So obviously, if you want to understand all those terms and know what is the right thing for you, you should speak with an attorney who understands this and can explain you all the implications.
Yeah.
And also, I think it very depends on what actually you are doing, right? If you're, for example, providing a service that is, I don't know, someone's life may depend on it. I have no idea, like something like that. So, well, maybe it makes sense to consider, forming as a company. Yeah. Versus if you're something like, you're designing a logo, so, what's the worst that can happen? I mean, probably no one is going to sue you on like, the logo colors were not to my liking or something like that. Then.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, as you can see in like this last part, like I totally agree with you, Lamore. Like if you're in a industry, like you're in medicine or something like that, like you should probably do your research and think about which way you want to go. No matter where you are, you should do the research and think about which way you want to go. But I just wanted to outline, how these things work and what I did for my business.
Yeah, and just a second, we have a question from Narissa about the previous slide. An SOW is a contract or an agreement?
It's a great question. I don't know, maybe like the semantic difference. It's, you get the company or your client to sign it and you sign it. So in that way, it's a contract, I guess. But yeah, so it's important that both of you look at it, acknowledge that this is the work being done. this is how much it costs, and this is the general timeline. They sign it, you sign it, you know, and that way there's something you can point at the end if there's some disagreement.
Marisa, hopefully that answered your question.
I don't know, maybe like there might be like a legal definition of the word contract that I don't know. But
oh, it did. I was making a statement because you had made a comment, Nisa, that you didn't use contracts, but I was going like a SOW is a contract, and you just stated that yourself.
Thank you. Yeah.
So it just came out of organic, you know, necessity.
Thank you, Narissa. Yeah, I mean, when I think of contract, I think of some sort of like legal document sort of reviewed by a lawyer, and you know, but yeah, but I haven't found a need for that yet in my business. Okay, so right now you might be asking yourself, okay, maybe I have these projects on the horizon. What if I have a client, but I haven't registered my business? What if I haven't thought about tax calculations? What do I need a separate business bank? What if I don't have, do I need to go to a lawyer first? And all of these are really good questions. And you should think about them as your business continues to grow. But I want to give you some advice that a friend of mine gave me, who's been running his own freelance business for about 11 or 12 years, which is just take the money. You know, like if you have a client and you're getting going, you know, don't worry about how you set up the back end right away, and don't let that be a blocker for you to really get started. You know, just get started, you know, and you will figure out how to make all of it work as you go. And really, like, anything you find out that, you know, you're missing, you can fix it later on. So yeah, just jump in, I guess, is my advice on this.
That's a great advice. Don't get, you know, overwhelmed with all the details, right? With all the different things you need to set up.
Yeah, and
don't
really
let it stop you.
Just focus on getting that first customer, because if that's your focus, you will kind of uncover the things that are missing, and you'll go fill it in order to get the customer, and that'll really help you expand. Okay, so getting paid. So there are all sorts of ways to get paid as a freelancer, and all sorts of ways that different people charge. And I can't tell you what you should charge, you know, or if you should charge by hour, or if you should charge by project. You can really experiment with this and find out what's right for you. What I will tell you is I think generally people tend to undervalue themselves. I know I did when I was first starting. And so what I would do is I would, you know, write out the proposal, I would look at the price, and then just for fun, I would double the price, you know, and like let that sit with me and see how that felt. You know, and usually I would end up somewhere in the middle from my first impulse and you know, and the double. So just, you know, try to think about like how you really value your work and how that compares to the market. And I have a couple of, on the right here, some examples of what I've seen, just to give you sort of like a way to ballpark where you might be at. And I'll review that in just a second. So the other thing is like whether to charge hourly or by project or by week or by month or whatever. Hourly is the easiest, and it's the most understandable in the market. You know, I've been curious, like, are there ways to kind of move away from an hourly rate? And I've seen, you know, usually what I've seen when I worked for Argo Design, you know, the way we would price was sort of on a project basis, but we would break it down by hour, you know, so people always want to, there's an attachment to like, what is the hourly rate? So I haven't been able to get away from it entirely. So just for whatever that's worth, just so that you know. But but these are some of the rates that I've seen in the market. And so just to give you kind of an idea of where you might fall, it really depends on your level of expertise, your level of experience, how many years of experience, and the work that you'll be doing for each customer. But I see web designers, range from 80 to 100. Engineers are usually around 130 to 160. If you're a business consultant in some kind of specialized field, it's 150 to 200. Any kind of engineering leadership, anything that would be sort of like director level and above is 200 to 250. It can even go higher than that. And then anything in law really goes, I've seen 350 to 450. So those are the ones I've seen. I haven't seen everything, but these are the ones that I'm familiar with.
That's great. I wanted to ask you, like, typically, I mean, you said about an hourly rate. I mean, but when you go about a project, would you prefer just to give them, okay, I estimate this to be, I don't know, 10 hours, my rate is, I don't know, whatever, $200 an hour, so it will be $20,000. And then, you just specify, okay, this is going to cost you $25,000, explaining them how you got to this number. Or you say, well, we're going to do the project. I estimate it's 10 hours, but I'm just going to send you a report how many hours I worked on that. So you kind of do the hour counting and send them. Which strategy do you usually?
I usually do the first one where I'm like, I think it's going to be this, and we estimate it, first, and then I give them a bill based on that estimate, and I give them a set, basically a sort of an out that, like, if we're completely wrong and the estimation is either significantly higher or significantly lower, what the hours we actually spend, then we will have another talk about pricing. And that works, it's fine. But the challenge is that, like, it's really hard to estimate, it's really hard to know how many hours a project is going to take. And what I would love to do, and what I'm trying to get to, is to get really good at, to have such familiarity with the projects that I kind of know how many hours they're going to take, and then just have a flat rate. And that way it takes the pressure off of me and the team, and it takes the pressure off the client too, that, like, we all feel like it's a good price. There's buffer, if we go higher or lower, but we don't have to be sitting there counting hours the whole time.
Yeah, that makes sense. So Julia is asking a question. After working with a client for a while, there comes a time when you have to raise your rate. Do you have any insights on how to do that? Have you done it?
That's a really good question. I have not done that with Think and Ink yet, but I did have some experience with that at a studio that I worked for. And usually the way that we handled that was, if there was an account manager that really had a good relationship with the client, that was the person who had the conversation. And we gave them sort of a lot of notice that this was coming, and gave them the reasons why. And that was really how it went. I've only had that experience, once or twice in the past, and the customer was okay with it.
How do you explain, a rate increase?
Yeah, usually it's like, it has to do with sort of the way that we talked about it was sort of, growth in the company, more advanced, more expertise being put onto their team. Was one reason that we did. And if they have problems with it, then I think, there's also negotiation that could happen at that point. But, like, we started giving our employees got a pay increase, and so that was then, like, we up leveled the amount of expertise that was on their team, and so we asked them to pay for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Any other questions? I thought I saw a couple more.
Not in the chat box. I covered all of them.
Okay.
But I'm happy to, if anyone wants to come off mute or to ask in the chat. We still have 3 more minutes.
I have one more slide on getting paid.
Yeah.
But do feel free to interrupt me if somebody has a question. So just a couple more. Invoicing, make sure you invoice immediately. So because if you don't, you just run all sorts of risks for not getting paid. So be really on top of that. You know, like with freelancing, you control your own trip. Like nobody is going to pay you unless you're the one advocating for yourself getting paid. And I use Wave invoices, the Wave app, in order to keep myself organized with my invoicing. And I couple that with Excel. But just that's a really important note is, you know, pick a software so that you can invoice and you can keep track of your invoices and do it on time.
That's a great advice.
Sounds obvious, but I've seen it not happen. So, yeah. And that's all I got.
That was fantastic. So informative.
Thanks. I hope you all found it informative. You can follow up with me if you have more questions. You can follow me on Instagram. You can go to my website and contact me there, or through LinkedIn.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Nisa. It was a pleasure, as always.
Same.
And thank you, everyone, for attending.
Yeah, thank you, guys. Hope you have a great day.
Yeah, everyone have a great rest of your day.